option appearing.
Marvelous.
Has it worked? I hope it's worked. I'm just going to go and check the channel. Let's have some comments if anyone can actually see us and hear us, which should be nice.
You are live, so I am apparently live as well.
Apparently, yep, it's all happening. Here we are. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first live stream that actually I am hosting, which is delightful. I finally got the software, which hurts the old bank balance, but you have to do these things. And I'm delighted to be joined once again by my partner in crime and co-conspirator, Jonathan M.S. Pierce.
I feel somewhat weird because I'm backseat driving today, so I'm not in control of anything, and I think that's all a bit weird. And I want to be pressing buttons and showing people things on screen, so I can't do it.
But you should be able to. I should be able to somehow give you permission to do that. I don't know how.
Yeah,
we'll figure it out.
Yeah, it's all good. It is crazy times at the moment. Crazy times, Jonathan.
It is. Well, just to set the scene for everybody, we are going to be joined by Irina from Dzyga's Paw. Whereas Jonathan has exceeded his target, wrapped up the campaign. I've got a few more days to go still. We're going to do the raffle today for that prize to drive people towards that, to make donations to Dzyga's Paw. We've already got 3 of the night drones in the bag, and if this goes really well, we could well cover a couple more, which would be fantastic. And we've got a video featuring Jonathan and I, where we went to visit Dzyga's Paw on the ground in Lviv. That is coming tomorrow. So again, that is another incentive for people to dip into their pockets and help out with Ukrainian resilience, because we're going to be talking about the so-called peace. Believe me, these drones are still going to be useful and essential. I think we can say that with 100% certainty, whatever happens. But Jonathan, over to you, because apparently I have missed out on some of the latest headlines. Well, let's welcome Irina first, because I can see Irina has joined us here. Hello. Oh, Irina's muted. I can't hear it. No sound coming through.
Unless she's not muted, she's just being particularly quiet. Just doesn't want to speak to us. Oh no.
There we go. Now we can hear your dulcet tones.
It was just something wrong with my mic. Sorry for that. Hello and welcome everyone.
Hello, welcome. And you are live on 2 channels here, Jonathan streaming and myself as well, which is fantastic. I've just gone into full screen mode, which scared me a little bit.
We can also do Dzyga's Paw if you want. I don't know, our YouTube is but there are a couple of people.
Fantastic. Yes, if you're able to stream, it's enabled, and you could certainly add that, which would be fantastic. We're going to do the raffle later in the episode when we've built up a little bit of an audience. We're going to start by talking about I'm calling it the phony peace, but apparently I've missed out on some of the latest statements. Jonathan, what has been going on?
If you shared that screen, just incredible. So Donald Trump has come out with a Truth Social statement about a telephone conversation that he's had with Putin, and he is just completely regurgitating Russian propaganda. It's absolutely phenomenal. So as Julian Rutte, the German journalist, says, you must be kidding me. This is 100% Russian propaganda. No Ukrainian troops are surrounded. No lives must be spared. Putin is in no position to do any good. No more comments. So Donald Trump says on Truth Social, him and Putin, we had a very good and productive discussion. We had very good and productive discussions with President Vladimir Putin of Russia yesterday. And there is a very good chance that this horrible bloody war can finally come to an end. All caps now, so this is fully capitalized. But at this very moment, thousands of Ukrainian troops are completely surrounded by the Russian military and in a very bad and vulnerable position. End caps. I have strongly requested to President Putin that their lives be spared. This would be a horrible massacre, one not seen since World War II. God bless them all. Now, I presume this is talking about the Kursk situation, where you have had a pretty bad operation withdrawal. I have to admit, I don't think it's gone. We're probably hidden from some of the issues concerning that, but I think the Ukrainians probably have lost an awful lot of equipment. There would have been a lot of POWs taken. There will be a number of lost Ukrainian soldiers, but are they completely surrounded at the moment? I don't think so. I'm not aware of this at all. No analyst is saying this. This is Putin speaking to Trump and Trump just believing what Putin says. I've long said that Trump is eminently, incredibly manipulatable, particularly by Vladimir Putin. And I think Putin here, I mean, this is what I said yesterday, please, don't get on the telephone with Putin. Putin wants to speak to you directly. That means he knows he can manipulate you. And here we are seeing it straight away. Donald Trump has been manipulated by Putin. This is absolutely terrible, and it doesn't bode well for Ukraine getting what they need out of negotiations. This entirely suggests that that Trump had two choices. Either with Putin saying he didn't want to do a ceasefire, choice one is go hard on Russia. Choice two is take on board what Russia's demanded and then put that back on Ukraine and punish Ukraine for Russia not doing not agreeing to a ceasefire because Russia want their maximalist demands realized. And I think we're going for the latter option here. And I suggest that Trump is likely to be siding with Russia, and this is bad.
I'd go further and say this is even more sinister, because the removal of intelligence data and targeting data, which lasted for just over a week, this kind of suggests to me that is removed, and the timing with Putin's operation to put pressure on Kursk. Now, he would have removed a lot of troops and machinery from other parts of the front. He would have massed that in Kursk. That's not something you do overnight. That's a fairly substantial operation for Putin to muster the resources to try to retake Kursk. So it seems to me the timing of switching off the intelligence information is not coincidental.
Yep.
And if there are rumors to be believed that the Russians are getting hold of some US mapping intelligence data, whether that is with the approval of the administration or not, it would suggest that this whole thing is a concoction where either Trump is manipulated into it or is actually directly working with Putin to try and realize some of the maximalist goals. But people should not be surprised at this, because Rubio and others have been dropping, maximalist demands into their conversation as if it was perfectly normal. They've been doing that continuously for the last couple of weeks. They've been regurgitating Russian propaganda. If you're tuned into it, you can hear the sort of nuances behind that. And then today we have Mark Rutte come out, which is something we need to look into as well. Now, he's come out and said that Ukrainian membership of NATO is off the table. This is another key,
really? I've not heard this.
Another key Russian demand. But there's a silver lining to this one. NATO is a zombie organization. It has no deterrence power, and Putin is minded to test NATO to absolute destruction. I don't think Ukraine, in or out of NATO, is going to give it the security guarantees that it needs, the genuine hard-edged security guarantees it needs. No, only alliances with Britain, France, and other countries can do that. Only the acquisition of a nuclear umbrella for European democracies can do that. So I think, to my mind, NATO is a zombie organization, and Mark Rutte, fine, weak as a wobbly jelly, but I don't think that really changes too much. What it probably does is the bit that allows Putin to demonstrate some kind of victory to his people. But I think that is probably the most hollow of victories, because NATO's not going to help Ukraine at this point.
I'm seeing that Mark Rutte, like again, Jürgen now another German voice here saying Rutte must go. Relations with Russia should be normalized after the
was the other one.
of hostilities in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So this is a full-on Trump like positioning, and it was really sad that in the White House yesterday they were almost joking over the annexation together of Greenland. It was oh my goodness.
Yeah, what has happened to Rutte? From someone who seemed to be quite strong, he's just flip-flopped into an absolute chocolate teapot of a politician. Irina, I hope this isn't all. I mean, you're resilient, and you guys are tough, but watching all of this stuff unfold, I mean, this must be a bit disturbing, at least from your end.
It is. And I know you discussed it like yesterday or the day before, but I think it was New York Times who released some kind of a proceeding document. I'm not quite sure, but I saw an article somewhere. So the NATO thing wasn't the only demand. I think the most critical thing for us was the decrease of the army. So the number of personnel in the army, just as Jonathan mentioned, it's not like I totally agree that like either NATO membership or not will not be like a guarantee for us. We are relying on our own troops very heavily, and like the thing that will disrupt it is like if they make Ukraine, cut the army like in half or even more. So I really hope we're not going to agree to this.
No.
But yeah,
and the other one is the pause in 30 days. So there's two things that Ukraine obviously will not agree to and cannot agree to. One is Putin demanding that there's no rearming of Ukraine for 30 days, that they're basically cut off from allies, from logistics and distribution, and that Ukraine, obviously, as you say, starts to reduce the numbers of its military. Well, both of those things are exactly what you would want if you were going to restart hostilities at the end of that 30-day pause, which I suspect Putin is minded to do. He needs to see what the reaction internally is, but also we've got to remember his economy is completely, it's been turned into a war economy and is going to get a significant economic shock if that comes to an end. So I don't think he can physically end war, whether that's the war against Ukraine or whether he starts a war somewhere else. Ukraine absolutely mustn't disarm.
So,
sorry. And that's why I think one of the other demands he had was the release, like the lifting of all the sanctions that are currently in place. I guess he was on the list, basically. But
yeah. And they can't do that. Surely they can't do that in the 30 days. I mean, they must have a breathing period before there's even talk of lifting any sanctions. Well, my view is the same as yours, which is we shouldn't lift those sanctions ever, until there's all the children are returned, the stolen children, until there's full reparations for the damage caused. But of course, that won't happen.
Just two things to add there. First of all, interestingly, some good news here that's just coming out. Germany have agreed. That's the CDU, the SPD, and the Greens have agreed to release the debt brake, which means they can borrow an absolute ton of money to help Ukraine, partly their own infrastructure, their own defense spending, but also help Ukraine. So that's good news there. But I think what's happened with Mark Rutte is almost certainly that he went into a meeting with Donald Trump, and Trump said, it's off the table or we're going to be out of NATO. And I presume Mark Rutte is just basically bent over a barrel here and having to do exactly what Donald Trump demands, because otherwise NATO ceases to exist. And as a Secretary General of NATO, he, I guess, has no choice, or I don't know. Those are my initial thoughts, but I'm absolutely flabbergasted that Trump has come out and said this, and then Mark Rutte has been on the news saying that. Just this is
it's appalling. It's appalling, and this was my fear articulated 6 months ago. And I couldn't really even get too many of the experts on my channel to really go along with this line, and that is that NATO has become a zombie organization, and those who function within it will refuse to see it because it's in their own financial benefit, but also their status, their prestige, their very positions in the sort of aristocracy of geopolitics is entirely dependent on this organization. So it's become a sort of bureaucratic zombie. And it's going through the motions, but not delivering actual concrete change and concrete deterrence. And my worry was that it will carry on in a zombie fashion, actually getting in the way of action and getting in the way of organizing for the new world that emerges. If Rutte had a spine, if Rutte was a leader, he would have said, fine, leave, go screw yourself, and taken decisive action to either retool NATO for its new purpose, or would have announced this is over. We need a new generation of NATO, which is far more action oriented. But no, he's a politician and he's a bureaucrat, and he's like all the rest of them. They live and breathe the status that his organizations give them. And now it seems that he's doing tremendous harm. And I articulated that was a danger, and here we are.
Yeah, there's not much more I can add to that. I just think I had a fascinating conversation with Edward Hunter Christie the other day on my channel live stream, where we were talking about the geopolitical game of chess that's going on and what the world looks like. And you've got this expansionist America, which is also at the same time isolationist. So they want to isolate from the rest of the world. In order to isolate from the rest of the world, you need to be completely self-dependent, right? You know, self-sufficient. So at the same time as kind of going inwards, so you're actually looking at places like Canada and Greenland that offer all these rare earth minerals and natural resources and oil and wood, lumber, you know. So yep, we're going to take that, which is going back to this form of, like, instead of gaining power through positive sum game activity with other cooperative allies and doing trade, it's like, well, if I want those resources, I'm not going to buy them off you, I'm just going to take your country. So it's like Greenland and Canada and Panama. So they tasked the Department of Defense with coming up with ways of interacting with Panama, going all the way to what would it look like to invade and take control of the Panama Canal. So all of this is a form of both isolationism and expansionism at the same time, because they're seeing the world as a place to carve up between other big strongman leaders like Vladimir Putin and like Xi Jinping. And the problem is the EU is stuck there. Well, what's our part in this, or Europe as a whole? And it's a case of, well, you're going to be carved up between these great players, and that appears to be, I mean, it sounds ridiculous that would be what we're talking about in 2025. But you tell me, you point to me the evidence that that's not the case with everything that Donald Trump is doing at the moment, whacking tariffs on everyone. This is a trade war with all their allies, which is a long-term approach to get self-sufficient, which is, right, we want to bring all of that manufacturing and all of those jobs back to the United States so that we are a self-sufficient nation that does not need the rest of the world. And if we want the rest of the world's input into this, we'll take the rest of the world. You know what? We will take a country. This is like old school imperialism. And it blows my mind.
I don't know if you saw, you know, it's strange because, you know, I remember Reagan at the time and everyone, you know, in their sort of supercilious way going, oh, look, who's going to elect an actor? Oh, my goodness. But when you listen to some of his speeches, many of them make a considerable amount of sense. Okay, he did do quite a bit of damage to the US, it has to be said, especially through media liberalization, which has led to the kind of you know, media silos that we've got now, and the oligarchization of media. But when you listen to him talking about trade tariffs and what absolute irrational nonsense they are, you kind of realize that he did get an awful lot of things about what made American power tick. And he understood that American power is driven by international trade, free trade, the maritime order, which is protected and defended by the US, by free speech, by free markets, and many other things besides, as well as alliances. And he was implacably opposed to tariffs, and he very cogently talked through, you know, how they might work in the short term, but in the medium to long term, they would lead to absolute disaster, and compared it to the Wall Street crash, from which, of course, you know, our modern, and then that led to the Second World War, and then our modern world order emerged from the detritus of all of that. What Trump is doing is unfortunately, you know, leading the US, I think, into another 1930s style depression.
Well, it depends
if he carries
whether
on with these actions.
Well, it depends on what timescale you're talking about. So, like, it's globalism has become this insult, hasn't it? This pejorative term. Whereas we look at this from smaller countries around the world and we go, well, we all need globalism, right? So if you're living in Belgium, right, at the moment, or if you're living in Austria, you're not going to go, yeah, we're going to take over the world. We're going to become, the Austrian Navy is going to be like absolutely, no, like the US can do that, but Austria and Belgium can't do that. And nor indeed can any nation on their own in Europe anymore. We're not living in the 1700s and the 1800s. So we have to work together as an alliance, as the EU, in order to compete with, and, you know, Brexit aside, we need to do that to compete with these empires that are operating in imperial manners. Now, if you're talking about a 5-year plan for the US, yeah, you might have a Great Depression, but the idea is that this is going to, you know, you have to get through that tough time in order to reap the rewards at the end, which is bringing back all the manufacturing and having this self-sufficient empire that doesn't really interact with the rest of the world because it doesn't need to, apart from when it does, when it will just take the parts it needs. And yeah, I find that quite scary, and so you will have a fight within the American government at the moment between those kind of globalist stock market multinational corporations saying, hang on, actually there's someone like, hopefully something like Apple, Tim Cook from Apple will go, hang on a second, like we'll bring some manufacturing back to the US, but we need the rest of the world to operate in the way that we do. And you will get a lot of pressure on Trump from people who don't have that view of where the US is going. I don't know. It's crazy times.
One would hope so. And perhaps Apple and Google are the ones that are going to be the last to resist. But we've seen Amazon, we've seen Facebook, and of course, Musk. I mean, many of these tech billionaires and oligarchs are either fully on board with this chaotic program that Trump has announced, Peter Thiel and others, or else they have bended the knee almost instantaneously with zero resistance. So I don't hold out too much hope. I mean, one of the things there that concerns me a lot is Google is rather important to us, as is YouTube, to continue broadcasting, continue putting these messages out to question what's going on. And ultimately you have to wonder, you know, how far the coercion is going to get all the way through to Google itself.
We live in an interconnected world, and I'm pretty sure that they can't really successfully go about doing something like that if it indeed is genuinely what the intention is. Because, you know, as someone says, you know, Mitch Mazzarola on my channel says, bringing back manufacturing to the US may domestically work to some extent, but the rest of the world can source these products elsewhere where they are cheaper to obtain. And I don't know. I think the rubber's going to hit the road soon. And I think a lot of the American public are going to get upset that actually they have just sacked loads of people who do really important work within the American government. And you're going to get people who are going to find inflation's hurting them. And you're going to have people looking at the stock market that's connected to their pensions, their 401ks, and they're going to be like, well, that sucks. And there's going to be this resentment for billionaires, that billionaires get to dictate everything, and actually we, the people, aren't. And then you get this push for tax cuts for the rich, which is what all this is all about as well. And you are going to get a populist movement. I think if the Democrats can get off their arse, if Chuck Schumer can sort himself out with the way he was voting, and I won't go into that, but you know, if they can rally the people in the US, then you might have a very discontent populace. But then you're starting to see things like, well, if anyone has illegal protest, then there'll be, you know, you're starting to see this real authoritarian political set of policies being rolled out, or not even voted on. They're just literally, being rolled out. So that actually is going to be very difficult. Freedom of speech is starting to be infringed upon, I think. And all the things that the Republicans said that they used to stand for, like freedom of speech and freedom of this and freedom of that, is now tariffs. You know, that kind of Republican is dead and buried. You have got a radical populism, which is isolationism, tariffs, regulation of the person. You know, you're not going to be able to have reproductive rights, freedom of speech, blah blah blah. The US is looking like it is drifting rather quickly towards full-on authoritarianism. I don't want to scare anyone.
It's just so surreal for me. Like, and what's next? Like, really, like for the
Well,
French
You're broken
Revolution.
up a little bit. You're
yeah,
broken
you
up a
broke
little
up
bit,
there.
Irina.
I couldn't. Can you say that again?
Oh,
Loose connection. Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, that's better. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, it's like when I hear this every time, it's like, will I like we will live like that for a couple of years, and what's next? Or what's in like a decade or so? Are we waiting for a second French Revolution? What will it lead to? It looks like if they really will make what they want to make, it looks like it will like lead to a global change, a very big global change. I can't believe it. Like from my perspective now, it's surreal, and I think Russia is doing it in a more smart way. And I think America has great soft power they can use, and which will bring them to way better results. But they are defaulting to, polarizing this whole thing and getting back to putting the power to the rich. And this is just like, wow, how could it happen in the 21st century? And then would you expect people to rebel? So would you expect Americans to stand up? Would you expect people to to go onto the streets? What are your thoughts? Like, will this happen or
I mean, someone posted here. I'm going to put this up because I think America still does have considerable vestiges of checks and balances, which are going to kick in, whether they're successful or not, whether they sort of take a beating and then have to be revived in 4 years' time when Trump leaves office, or maybe snuffs it before then. But we do have Bernie Sanders, who is not keeping quiet. Tim Walz just announced that he's going on a town hall roadshow of GOP areas. So I think you're starting to see a couple of, let's say, brave and hardy souls step up. And there are others that are really notable by their absence. Kamala Harris, where is she? Ocasio-Cortez is very vocal, as you'd expect. Obama.
She's been advised to primary Chuck Schumer. So Chuck Schumer, basically,
Yeah.
for those who don't know, they were trying to vote through the budget, if you like, at the early stages of this. And Chuck Schumer, as the Senate minority leader for the Democrats, rather than voting against that, actually voted for that because he didn't want to shut down the government. So there are reasons why that would be the case. But actually, it's the only bit of leverage the Democrats have. So, and they weren't consulted on the budget at all. So the Republicans didn't go to the Democrats to say, we're going to do this. How do you feel about this? They just said, right, this is what we're doing, whether you like it or not. And we expect you to vote for it. So what the Democrats should have done is entirely not voted for it. But then there was a bunch of them, including Chuck Schumer, who did vote for it. And then Ocasio-Cortez was saying, this is not acceptable. We need to be using our leverage here. And now people are saying she should primary, because she's a House of Representatives, the lower house. Every 2 years she has to campaign and get elected again. People are saying she should primary Chuck Schumer in his Senate position, which is every 6 years, and actually, as a progressive Democrat, try and unseat him to be a Democrat, a younger, because he's getting old now, Chuck Schumer, a younger, more vibrant person who knows how to communicate with the public, has a really good handle on social media, etc., etc. So there's loads of interesting dynamics going on there. Bernie Sanders has got a massive movement at the moment. He keeps going to these places where there are just overflow to overflow to overflow, people waiting to try and see him make these speeches about oligarchy. So there are these people, but yeah, Chris Murphy, watch him. I think he'll be the next Democrat nominee for president.
And I had a guy on the channel, a congressman, just a couple of days ago called Jake Auchincloss, and again, sort of moral clarity on many issues. He had some interesting things to say about NATO, which actually I wouldn't necessarily entirely disagree with him. And his point was, either NATO should have been serious back, in the 2000s, that it was going to let Ukraine and Georgia in, or it should have been absolutely frank and upfront right at that time, but not create this sort of ambiguity. Well, wouldn't it be nice maybe one day? And I think he has a point to that, because Yeah, I think things may have gone differently, not because Putin wouldn't have invaded. I don't mean in that sense. I mean, he would have done that anyway. But if NATO membership was off the table, then it may be that other allies might have found other ways to support Ukraine rather than living in the sort of delusional la-la land of NATO membership. In some ways, what Rutte's come out and said is like, okay, fine. Now NATO is done and as I say, has this sort of zombie half-life it's living through. And I think it's understood in Britain and France, certainly, that whatever European security that we believe in, you know, we have to do something about it. We can't wait for the Americans or NATO or somebody else to do something about it. But Irina, isn't it curiously ironic, if you look at the broad sweep of history, Ukraine, whose identity and this sort of boisterous democratic culture you've got, which has been absorbed and silenced for hundreds of years by a sort of genocidal autocratic neighbor, isn't it ironic that you are now not just on the edge of world freedom, you are, it feels like the rock that's standing just above a rising tide. Ukraine is front and center of the world.
It is indeed. It's sometimes just unbelievable to, think of it. When I think of this deeper, it's like, wow, nobody would expect it. And every time you're like, when we're talking about these, like when I hear the word like freedom, democracy, everything that clicks, we imagine America in our heads every time. Like since I was raised as a child, my imagination was like that because my parents, my grandparents would put it as a strict like comparison and counterpart to what they experience in the USSR, and they would say like, so this is the country that represents all of these values. Like, look what they have, look what they achieved, look at the cultural differences, look at the freedom of speech, look at the like freedom of like self-expression, at all the different types of things they have. So never like, and I thought of us as people who grew out of very tough conditions. We had those values in the background always. It's in our literature, but it's like a constant fight. So we're always kind of fighting and struggling and having big losses. And thinking of American values was like an ideal thing for me to have and to dream of. And it's just it blows my mind where we are now. So,
Jonathan, is there a historical parallel here? Because I'm not up on this. You may know a little bit more than this. Wasn't there a period where Europe was enveloped in the Dark Ages and, a lot of classical literature was lost, a lot of classical learning, but actually it was monks sitting in a soggy little island slightly to the east of us who essentially managed to nurture civilization for a number of decades, if not centuries, when it was almost snuffed out, certainly in Western Europe. And that was in Ireland, and the sort of monks who preserved a lot of the learning to reintroduce it back into Europe. Now, maybe that's a mythologized version of it, but is there a little bit of truth in that?
I'm not 100% sure. I know there's been some attempts to rewrite some of the history here, depending on who you read. So the Dark Ages really weren't that dark, and the Christians did an amazing job of like blah blah blah. So there's some revisionist history there that you got to be wary about. But it's just so sad where you think you look over the last sort of 100 years and you're just seeing progress continually, and things are getting better. And then you're looking at life now and you're thinking, this is the first time, and I know progress isn't always just a smooth route. Sometimes it's bumpy, but I don't know. This feels like we could be on the precipice. If the US takes a turn for the worse, we could be on a precipice of just going in the wrong direction in a really meaningful way. And the problem is when you lose things like democracy, getting them back is very, very difficult. And I mean, I trust the US not to fail at this point in time, but it is scary that we are considering that they could, and then if those checks and balances are taken away, then it goes in the wrong direction. The problem is you have entities like Russia and China that aren't interested in helping the US to maintain its democracy. And this is why in Europe, we've got to fight really hard. Don't take for granted what we have. We just need to be fighting all the time to maintain our grip on democracy, because it is always only by fingertips. You know, we think it's comfortable, but I think this is showing us that things can go bad really, really quickly. I remember the London riots some time back when the police shot someone, and then within a couple of days you had burning streets and whatnot. And that's when in fact, I wrote a book called Survival of the Fittest, which is like a zombie. It's a series. Metamorphosis is the first one in the series, and it was looking at the idea that if there was an outbreak, and this was before the actual pandemic, that society can fall apart really, really quickly. And if you start, you know, if people were dying, in this case, if people were dying in the judicial and the law enforcement, then actually what's holding people together? And I think we think our institutions and our society are glued together much more strongly than they really are, is kind of what I'm saying.
And I think we take it for granted, or have taken it for granted, in relatively peaceful times, which you know, we've been experiencing since the 1990s, and there's a certain assumption that will only carry on getting better and improve. But what that soft period, I think, has allowed is for a form of sort of complacent oligarchy to emerge. I think we've forgotten that actually the role of governance is to reduce power and wealth where it pools in certain places, because that starts to not only deny the rest of the population, you know, wealth that gets recycled in the economy. Because I mean, look at America and how many, you know, gazillionaires are pooling vast quantities of money. Are they spending in the economy to make things, to invest in education? No, it's sitting in their bank accounts doing nothing. Or in Musk's case, that sort of equity bubble he's managed to create is used for fairly pernicious things. But I think the role of government, whether you're on the left or the right, should be to erode monopolies, erode oligarchies, try and remove oligarchic influence where it might deform, you know, democratic process, or deform media messaging and narratives in favor of these you know, sectional interests, because that's the things what we're seeing now. Again, Ukraine puts Ukraine front and center, because Maidan and the processes we see around that are absolutely about trying to tackle oligarchic influence and nepotism and all these things.
We were just discussing, you know, Maidan and protests we had with friends a couple of days ago, and we were thinking of like how do we map it onto current United States situation. And you know, the big problem, the big issue to discuss here is the size of the US compared to the size of Ukraine. So here, people were able to concentrate really in one place. So people, even though we had smaller protests all around the country, like in Lviv, Dnipro, whatever, like even in my small town with 30,000 people, like US is like incomparably bigger than Ukraine, and people are distributed. So even like if we are talking about, you know, getting it from the roots, you know, getting people to come out to show it, it will be extremely harder, and I can't imagine this in like on such a scale. And I think it's very like state by state, it differs tremendously. So if you have, like, you know, San Francisco, or if you have California, people would like, there are many Democrats there, it's blue, people would get concentrated there and maybe try to do something, try to think of something, but they will be in their environment. Whereas like the problem they have to deal with is in Washington, DC, or like people from Texas are in completely different, you know, environment than people there are in California. So it's a critical, you know, thing to consider. And I know what are your thoughts? How could we, like, what could we do? What could Americans do to counter this? The growth of the oligarchy and the growth of like wealthy people in power.
One of the things that you've really well highlighted there is a lack of focus, and actually Jonathan Fink talked about that earlier with regard to focus on an individual. And the Democrat problem at the moment is they don't have a leader. They need one very charismatic, very popular leader to to rally behind. You need someone to carry the flag, and you need a focal point, someone that's going to go out there endlessly, just beating the drum for the people. And this needs to be a working class thing. There needs to be a narrative, and you can see this is starting to happen. There's a narrative being generated about how billionaire oligarchs, and Musk is getting booed all over the place. His negative favorability ratings are worse than Vance and Trump's negative favorability ratings combined, right? So he's at -21. I think Trump is at -8, Vance is at -10, something like that. So if you were a strategist for the Democrats, I'd be like, right, we need someone like, I don't know, AOC is probably too divisive. You need someone someone like Chris Murphy, who can appeal to some of the people in the center and whatnot. Get someone like him, and then just really generate this narrative of billionaires taking your money, making decisions, not elected, that kind of thing, and rally around that. And you also need, I mean, the great thing that the Republicans have is they have Fox News as a propaganda, a single-minded propaganda outfit, which the Democrats do to a degree at MSNBC, but still, like, they like to be critical. You eat your own on the left or the center left, but on the right, they're very unified, and there's very little criticism of Trump at the moment. Even though they know he's making wrong decisions. So yeah, you need a coalescing around an individual, an idea, and a platform, and then you just need to go to town and mobilize people on the ground like Bernie Sanders.
And get Bernie as the VP, because whereas not all his policies would suit a lot of Americans, actually he's not the rabid communist who he's made out to be. I mean, if you compared him to European politicians, I mean, he's kind of centre left, but he's not that radical, actually.
But his policies are actually really popular, right? So he famously, Joe Rogan, advocated for Bernie Sanders. So what you need to do is you need to fight right-wing populism with another form of populism, and I would say this is a populism that is truly represents. So the whole thing about populism is about the elites. You divide. I could bore you because look, I've got a book on populism I'm reading at the moment, but it's about otherizing.
It's not one you wrote there, Jonathan, is it?
No,
plug for one of your
we'll
products.
Even longer, yeah. But it's about like demonizing the elites usually. But the problem is with the Trumpian populism at the moment is that the elites they're demonizing are the very people that they are giving more power to. He's got 13 billionaires in his cabinet and administration, and he's got an unelected billionaire. They are just the elites. The swamp is not only not being drained, he is drowning in the swamp. He is like lathering his body in the swamp, and he's like, bring on the swamp. I want to be the swamp monster. And actually you could get a true kind of populism, like, or not true, but one that really goes to like being anti-elitist if you had a Bernie Sanders approach, and his policies are actually more popular than people think.
And it needs to be visible. It needs to be someone who is day in, day out, sort of hitting the streets, hitting the town halls, gathering crowds. He is articulate as well. I think that helps. I mean, you have to have someone who can spin a phrase in real time and for it to stick. I'm not sure Karma quite had that. I mean, maybe given time, she would have developed a bit more of I would say, that sort of rhetorical touch there. But you need someone who's really going to drive it. And yeah, I don't know. The other thing I would suggest, and I've been suggesting this to some of my American comrades in arms who are either in Ukraine or supporting Ukraine, it's like, create a new Republican Party, split the vote, split that, peel away Republicans that still remember, Reaganite values, people who genuinely think of themselves as people of honor, who genuinely think of themselves as pro-constitution and valuing democracy, people who are prepared to acknowledge when the other side wins an election, something as simple as that. There are plenty of those people, and they're getting increasingly disgusted by the chaos that Trump is engendering.
You can't. The problem is with that approach, and that sounds great in a pluralist coalition type political system, but when you got first past the post as your mechanism for voting, then a third party that splits the vote means that actually both the MAGA republicanism.
That's the point. That's the point.
Yeah.
So we'll split the conservative vote, allowing the Democrats to come in. That's the strategy.
Absolutely, but in order for the Republicans or the Reagan Republicans to do that, they would have to know that they are not going to get into power, and B, the MAGA GOP won't get into power. So this is effectively working for the Democrats. So they would have to know that in order to go and do that, because it would just mean a landslide Democrat victory.
It's a long-term strategy, because they would have to admit that the next election out they would lose, and actually they're essentially campaigning to ensure that Trump MAGA loses. And then when that crashes, burns, and they can stomp on its ashes, then yes, future elections they'll have a chance of competing when it's back to a more of a stable two-party system. But I don't see it's enough for Democrats to resist. I think you're going to have some organized resistance from the conservative side, and that means they're going to have to essentially bury the party, which many of them still feel they're part of, even though there's no vestiges of the thing that they value left. They're still, they're still a member of the club, even though the clubhouse has gone to rack and ruin and it's letting all sorts of riffraff that they don't want to associate with. They've still got their club membership, and they've got to burn those membership passes and get on with it.
Yeah, agreed.
I guess what do we do about the raffle? What do you think about that? Should we do the raffle thing? Yes,
we can do it. I think you finished the fundraiser, and you're did 2,000 more, I believe.
Yes, so far, yeah, which is very exciting.
This is great. This is almost a drone, and I saw people commenting with the donations. So probably we'll be getting some more donations to this fundraiser. But we'll wrap up with the raffle now.
Yeah.
Good.
Let's do the raffle, and then just to let the audience know, the episode on Dzyga's Paw will be coming out tomorrow. That hopefully will drive things a little bit, further. People can engage with the story. They can see you and your team in all its glory there. And then we'll give that a couple of days to work through, and then we'll call in the campaign next week. But I'm very much hoping we can get at least one, if not two, drones over and above the target that was set.
Awesome. Should we increase the target or just leave it as is?
We'll leave the target. But aim to get a bit more in.
Cool. Great. By the way, while I'll be sharing the screen, I contacted the winner from the ATB fundraiser. He was extremely happy to be contacted. Basically, he said he was not on the stream, but he watched it later. So he watched the recording. And he smiled, when he saw his name. It was Paul E. from Sweden. And I already got the message from him, what he wants us to sign on the flag. And we got it to the military, and they signed it already. It's on the way to us, and we will be packing it all and sending it to him.
That's amazing. That brings a tear to my eye. That's so cool, Iryna. Thank you. You're amazing.
And I guess you mentioned about your patches, didn't you? Should I share something with you, or we just ship our thing and this is it? Yeah,
ship your thing, and then we'll organize behind the scenes to try and figure out who else can get a silicon curtain patch. I still need to get those commissioned. I mean, it takes a couple of weeks to get them commissioned and printed and sent from Ukraine, so it'll be a while before people get those. But we made the promise that anyone over $100 US or pounds would also be getting on top of that, a silicon curtain patch, and it will happen.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. Then we will not wait because we can do it immediately, kind of. All right. So let me check first the total number of the donations and confirm that it's the same as I got when I did the export of the data. So it was 1,200,000. Is that correct? I'm very bad at reading numbers.
Let's have a look. It's still refreshing.
Yes,
on my screen, I've got it at 12,552.
Yes, it should be something like that, 12,500. Let me see, it's retrieving fresh thing. And just let's wait a moment, because maybe there is somebody else we need to include, and if not, we will just proceed. Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's the same number I've got.
yeah,
Brilliant.
say 24.8 is the latest, and here I got the same. Okay, and the total is 12,552. Yes. Okay, good. All right, then I'm taking this sheet address and pasting it. I guess it's the same because I tested it. And we will see now. Just to remind the folks, we are raffling customly signed flag from one of the units we support, Babylon, from 125th Brigade, which used to be a territorial defense brigade, but they now transformed into a separate brigade because they've been doing really cool work. And we have a vertical drawn crew over there, Babylon, and they will be sending out their patch and customly signed flag for the particular winner of this particular raffle. So, and on top of that, we are adding some merch from Dzyga's paw. I can actually show it to you. So we will have this cool patch. Don't know if you see it. Do you see it?
I can see that. That's cool.
No,
Super
no, you
Panther.
can't. You need to, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry.
Irina, there's a comment in front of her face, so you need to remove.
Oh, there we go. Right, that's better. We can see it now.
Okay, yeah. So a patch, a pin, and then a set of stickers with this cute little dog, which is our boss, basically, and a shopping bag from Dzyga's. And we will have the best thing on this list, which is Lviv chocolate, handmade chocolate from Lviv Chocolate Factory. I'm still impressed you didn't try it yet. You're very welcome next time you're in Lviv.
We'll definitely try that. It's not
Yeah.
Mr. Poroshenko, is it? It's not one of his. No.
It's very local from Lviv, and I love it. Okay, so the summary is, here is the total number of donations. The tickets is 575. So 575 chances total for this raffle. And here are some of the people who donated the most. So the top person, there are two people who donated $1,000. So they got 50 tickets each. Some of them, one of them is anonymous, but I hope there is email. And another one is Thomas. So they have high chances, but we will see if it works out. I'm running the random winner selection now. All right. So the winner is anonymous, but there is email, so we will contact them, but they didn't enter the name. And this is some email, some anonymous winner. Congratulations.
Yay, anonymous! Woo! Well done, anonymous.
Let's hear it for anonymous.
Yeah, they donated to, basically they got 10 tickets because they donated $200 and a little more. That's cool. Not always big donations win, and this is very pleasant to know. Okay, so wait for the email and then wait for the parcel from Lviv. I hope they will respond. If not, we will have to think of how to deal with it.
Yeah, we'll have to rerun the numbers and pick the next one down. But yes, hopefully they'll get a response to this, and they'll be delighted at their win, because it's a fantastic prize. I still need to get a signed flag. That's something next time I'm over. You need to get a hold of one of those, because everyone's got one now, and half the guests that come on my channel have lovely signed flags. You got two. Look at that.
You're such a loser, Fink.
We can get one for you for making this fundraiser, basically.
Oh no! Don't.
Oh.
Hey, hang on.
Hang on a second.
You want to
Hang
be
on.
special, don't you?
Well, yes, and especially whoever gets the drones, it would be it'd be lovely to make contact with them and understand how they're being impacted by it. So that's something we can follow up on.
Absolutely, we will pass that. So when we will be getting those, we will probably label the drones based on who provided them, because we typically do some nice stickers or whatever. And if there are bigger fundraisers like yours, we would provide some kind of information of who helped raise funds for the military folks. And there are nice stories where, military people were asking us for contacts, either phone numbers or some WhatsApp contact, so they can, write to the donors directly. So I hope this will work out, and it's really like always great to get in direct contact with the end user of this and understand, the impact, because people love sharing it. People love sharing some videos from the like how the drones are working, and I think it will be great for the donors, like to show it on your channels and streams, and to see the real results, not just the donations on the website. So we will be following up on that soon.
That absolutely, and we can even, if they have permission to do so and want to, we can put clips on the channel either as shorts or we can even do full interviews, because I've got a few interviews coming up with people who obviously are in uniform, and I think it's very important to get their perspective when as long as it doesn't get them into trouble. That's the main thing.
Yes. Yeah, a lot of people know we are, working with foreign audience. So always our first question is, do you have somebody from your unit who speaks English and can like understand, and who is like okay for public, talks and stuff like that? So most of the units either didn't have it, but they have it now, or they like had it and searched for some kind of people like that from the very beginning. So that's one of the things that works great with us, and people are typically happy to talk because they don't even expect somebody from abroad supports them. And when we tell them, we get donations from 60 different countries, they're like, wow, is it Ukrainians who are living abroad, who moved? And we're like, no, these are not Ukrainians. They are impressed. They don't believe us. And I'm like, okay, go talk to them directly. You will see it's like they won't understand you're Ukrainian, bro. So.
This is actually so important, because in all these conversations about it being a proxy war and this and that, and people don't know what they're fighting for, this demonstrates beyond anything that Ukrainians are fighting for values they hold dear to themselves. Some of those values, of course, are universal ones, but the fact they're prepared to fight, even if they don't even aware that anybody else is with them in that fight, that's an extraordinary and almost inexplicable strength.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've just been looking, sorry to change the subject here, but I've just been looking at some of the news coming out to go back to what we were talking about earlier, how Putin and Trump had this conversation and blah blah blah, and then he released his Truth Social post. But the White House has clarified that actually it's Stephen Witkoff that was talking with Putin, so that's not a result of Trump. Which is to say, as Julia Davis from Russian Media Monitor says in reply to Donald Trump's Truth Social post, his intelligence briefings, i.e. what he's saying about Kursk, his intelligence briefings are coming from Tulsi Gabbard, RT and Sputnik, and Stephen Witkoff, Putin. So Trump's intelligence, Trump's claims about thousands being surrounded are just it's outrageous, isn't it? And also worth noting that this is how I think this is reflective of how I think the American negotiators are playthings to the Russians. I think that Witkoff is a billionaire, but he's not an international negotiator on behalf of the US in times of war. After arriving around lunchtime on Thursday, Witkoff was left twiddling his thumbs for at least 8 hours before being called into the Kremlin, according to Sky News. Putin was apparently too busy having a chat to Lukashenko for 8 hours. So yes. I think they're just playing with them. Of
course they are. Of course they are. And you haven't mentioned yet, and this is absolutely critical, the only person, okay, he's ridiculously weak. He said some awful things, and I have zero respect for him. But the only person who had an even vague idea of what's actually going on is General Kellogg.
And
not sidelined. He's now been physically removed. He's not sidelined. He's gone. He's actually off the team at the request of the Kremlin, because he's the only person who actually knows a little bit and can distinguish some reality from fiction.
It's a fact that they literally said he's too close to Ukraine. Can you get rid of him? And the US went, all right then. It's just like it's unbelievable. It's like I spoke to Zarina Zabriskie yesterday, at length about the connections between Trump and you've spoken to him before, her before.
Yes, that's right. You met
Jonathan.
her in Lviv, which was lots of fun.
Yeah, I didn't actually. I didn't meet her. You did. I think I was ill at that time. But yes, but spoke to her about the connections between Trump and the Kremlin, and it's so blatantly obvious because like, at the very least, everything that Trump is doing at the moment is completely in line with what Russia would want. Is just like, if he's not compromised, then what the hell explains what he's doing is just insanity. But yeah.
I mean, what explains it is inexperience, ignorance, lack of context, no strategic thinking, surrounded by idiots and yes men. I mean, listening to John Bolton, it was interesting because he took a kind of, Occam's razor to it. And he said, look, all the behavior doesn't require some elaborate, he's a Kremlin agent. It can be explained through sheer idiocy and narcissism,
Hanlon's
equally
razor.
well.
Hamlin's razor says, don't put down to malice what can better be explained by cock up or like ineptitude. So yeah, I mean, John Bolton has himself said that he just doesn't know anything. Trump, essentially, like he said a number of times that and lots of people have said this, he just doesn't have. I mean, he's clearly doesn't have the knowledge because he keeps saying things that show he doesn't have the knowledge, or asks people what certain things mean, or says, Spain, yeah, they're in BRICS, aren't they? No, Spain are not in BRICS. Like, so he self-evidently, like, he's giving you that evidence himself that he doesn't have the knowledge. Other people who have worked then say he doesn't have the knowledge, and yet he's in the middle of this tussle, this global tussle between all of these massive global players, and he's like Mr. Vacant, and it's just like, wow, like, of all the people you want there, not him. I mean, he's just like, I don't understand any of this. All I want to know is how much money is the US making out of this. Like, that's all I want to know is, like, where are my rare earths? My rare earths. I want my rare earths. Sorry.
If it wasn't so deadly serious, it would be extraordinary. And of course, as a scriptwriter, you can never pen a script where all this stuff happens. Because they turn around and go, look, this is so ludicrous. I mean, is this a political thriller or a comedy? What let's get Armando Iannucci to
I was just going to say that,
to direct it. Yes. Even then, when they did Stalin's funeral, if you've seen, I don't know if Irina's seen Death of Stalin. It's a British satirical comedy about the days following the death of Stalin and all the intrigues amongst the Politburo, and it's played by a mixture of American and British comic actors, and it's so dark. The humor is so dark and hilarious. But when you speak to, it's like sort of, Monty Python does history kind of thing. When Armando Iannucci was interviewed, he said that they had to take out some of the more bonkers stuff because people just literally would find it too farcical and ridiculous already.
Even though it's actually what happened. So
even
people
if
complaining,
and it was banned by the Kremlin immediately, obviously, because what you can't do is satirize not just the current dictator in the Red Fortress. You can't satirize all the former dictators and butchers either, because it degrades the very idea and institution of the authoritarian.
There are some people complaining at the moment, the comedians in America, saying that no, it wasn't actually. It was some other people yesterday, but they were saying that they can't do satire at the moment because literally, like, reality is that ridiculous that it's really difficult to do satirical comedy. It's like, yeah, imagine if Trump said this. No, he literally did say that yesterday.
Yeah, but imagine
if Trump like was actually working with Putin. No, he is working with Putin. I mean, this isn't satire. This is reality.
But this is going to be not just interesting because obviously it's extremely serious and it's got such an element of tragedy to it. But if, as you and I suspect, Trump is going to be following the Russian playbook, is going to be following their maximalist demands, the only person who in any way could push back is Rubio, and he's shown he's relatively spineless. But he might have some point where he goes, well, hang on a second, we can't ask them to do that. At some point, Ukraine is either going to need to walk away from it or simply prolong the simple ceasefire, but it never actually gets to an agreement. it is simply a ceasefire.
Mhm.
And I think we kind of know. I mean, you know this much better than I, because you know you grew up in this period. Russia will systematically break the ceasefire. It will fire into Ukrainian territory, even if you know the large-scale battles are paused. It will carry on doing provocations. It will carry on, you know, spinning lies and nonsense and all sorts of things.
You know, we just had our strategic planning session yesterday, so we just gathered for the whole day as a team, and it was basically the first time we considered like different scenarios, because current agenda is way different from what we saw a year ago. So now we're like, okay, what happens if we have some kind of ceasefire or some kind of agreement? Like, what if the fire is stopped for like, I don't know, for a month, for half a year, for a year? We didn't consider a lot of different scenarios, but like when we started talking about that, every team member of the organization of like Jigaspo, we were completely sure we need to continue focusing on military aid. So there were some ideas like, what if we go into, you know, supporting, what if we go into rebuilding, rehabilitation and stuff like that. But then everyone was like, wait, what? Like, it's not going to happen. Like, even if we have some ceasefire, it will be just temporary. We are like, everyone agreed on that. We were completely sure like the fire will continue at some point. So we will have to rearm, we will have to work on like research and development for the technological, like military technological things. We will have to get better and get more advanced in a technological way, and it will be completely, you know, 100% of our resources invested in rearming and getting stronger, and not losing our focus while working with other issues, because like we were working with military support by now, and we just decided this is what we'll continue to do, because literally like 9 out of 9 people were completely sure there is no point in believing it will stop if like there is kind of some kind of a ceasefire made with the current you know, propositions that we are getting. So yeah.
I'd say there's this lovely comment here points out we'd all be goose stepping to the pub and drinking German lager if we'd behaved in the same way in 1942 or whatever. It is a curious one. I think fortunately Britain, I don't think, is taken in by the Russian games. I think at this point, I don't think Macron is taken in at this point. He's had enough of a personal dealing with Putin not to trust anything he says and does. The Germans under Scholz would have been epically weak, but it looks like they're getting a much stronger person at the helm. The timing of that is extraordinarily advantageous. I think with these three countries more or less aligned, and then you have, you know, the Netherlands, the Nordics, the Baltics, who understand absolutely, you know, what's going on. I don't think, you know, whatever Trump signs, I don't think we will start rearming Ukraine. But this is another interesting question for you, Irina, because Putin can insist that there isn't large-scale commitment from the US to rearm Ukraine.
Yeah.
But actually, that's not what's been happening for some time anyway. Germany and others have been investing, Denmark and Germany especially, have been investing in the Ukrainian defense industry so they can build their own shells. You're part of this extraordinary effort to build and innovate drones. To an extent, maybe the US can agree not to carry on, you know, supplying Ukraine. That doesn't mean you won't be rearming at a furious pace from your own resources and your own innovation and manufacturing base.
Yeah, agree. We were like, talks were extremely intense about all of that after Munich Security Conference. Like everybody was talking about, you know, getting the drones and getting them made. And I think the big deal here is that Ukraine is like, we need a lot of drones now. Other European countries will not necessarily need like that huge amount of drones to rearm, and they are really focused on getting away from Chinese components. And this is one of the main challenges, because like Ukrainian manufacturers will need to choose, like, do we develop a production and do we focus on selling to Europe, selling to American counterparts? Do we even like have this as our goal? Suggest it to them, like prove it's good and it's better than like what they could have developed. And for this, we will need to think like them, and we will need to think they do not want Chinese components and Chinese parts. And this is basically not what most of people are doing in Ukraine, because most of people in Ukraine are thinking of how to make it the cheapest and the fastest. And it's a completely different product than any European or like any European country or America will require. So it's a very interesting question for me. I'm sure there will be teams who, understand that and focus on developing products that would specifically fit their requirements. But another thing is that a lot of big, defense companies are getting in Ukraine. So like, Rheinmetall, like the big sharks, they are opening offices here. They are putting their representatives here. And I think Ukrainians are not that like far into defending and protecting the technology they have. So it might be that we are left behind, like in the global, like longer perspective. So it's a critical moment now, as I see it, and I hope like there will be teams who will be able to do it quick and fast. But in the very end, it's about like intellectual property and things like that. But in the very end, we have a lot of small production capabilities, like a lot of small drone laboratories, a lot of bigger plants that are making drones now, and no country in Europe has this, or in the US. The amount we are making are really big, so perhaps we will be able to kind of produce it and to share expertise and to sell it. This is one of the ways we can sustain, and I hope we will be able to use it really for our economy.
Isn't it the case that Ukraine has extraordinary institutions for training engineers on a mass scale? It has, an IT industry that can produce sort of programmers and technicians, and when you combine that with the fact that many people will be coming out of the armed forces with direct experience of having deployed and used, various technologies. Whether the IP can be protected or not, it seems that Ukraine has an extraordinary resource that means that Western manufacturers will want to site production, research, development in Ukraine for a whole variety of reasons.
Yeah, I agree to that. Like even given my small case and my point of view from Lviv, a lot of universities, and including my university, for example, they are working very actively towards launching specific programs. Like Kyiv School of Economics launched a program for drone engineering, like a undergrad, like a full educational 3 or 4 year program. Then we are launching certificate programs for integration engineering, which means to integrate different software solutions specifically onto drones. Like just a week ago, we worked on a summer school for FPV drone engineering that is designed for first year undergrad students, basically 18-year-olds, to be able, like in 2 weeks, to learn how to assemble an FPV drone and how to understand how the electronics work inside and how to deploy it and actually learn to fly it. So indeed, no country has that. It's not, people have that, but the scale on which we are, working on that in Ukraine is just dramatic. And it's about only, like, I've covered formal institutions, but most of that is coming from NGOs, from some hobby groups, from some people who are just like, there was some guy who was a geek. He was interested in electronics, so he gathered his friends, and they are now, sitting in a room working on the drones. And it's very distributed. There are a lot of small teams, just as I mentioned. And indeed, the expertise is good. So that's why companies would be interested to come, I'm sure, which they are doing basically already.
Well, actually, I'll get to this in a bit. Thank you to Mark Bizcu. That's the second really generous super chat he's done. He says there is nothing to feel even mildly optimistic about. For Putin, your willingness to negotiate means your willingness to surrender. If you think you can negotiate with Putin, you've already lost. This is really important. A couple of things I want to say to this.
I'm guessing he's Polish as well, so he's
No, Mark
slightly
Biscuit
slightly
is
coaster,
Ukrainian.
isn't it?
Ukrainian.
Is he Ukrainian? Is he? Oh.
Yeah. For living in Canada and has lived in Britain, so he sees himself as like British Ukrainian, Canadian Ukrainian. So Mark and
this
Oliver,
sounds very Ukrainian / Eastern European. Like
Yes.
we've been there and we know how they think.
Well, yeah. So what was interesting? I remember reading a book called Overreach by Ern Matthews, very good book about the war in Ukraine and the lead up to it. And there was a really interesting observation from someone that was in a meeting in 2019 between Putin and Zelensky. I don't know who it was. I don't know if Andrei Yermak was around at the time, but anyway, whoever it was said it was really interesting at this meeting. It's clear that Putin has never ever compromised in his life, and you've got a dictator who's no one's ever said no. So when you do politics, this is really important to understand here. When you do politics in say the UK, you're fighting to get elected. You're fighting against your own party to get a nominee, to become the nominee, and then you're fighting against other parties, and then you eventually get elected into that constituency, and then you're going to the parliament and you're arguing all the time with other people, and then you're on TV, and when you say stuff on TV in the UK, the reporters give you hell, right? It's very difficult to be a politician in the UK and not get absolutely criticized or argued with the whole time. When you are a politician in Russia, when you are Vladimir Putin, no one talks back to you. No one argues with you. So he's never had to compromise. So in UK politics, you're like, ebb and flow and give and take, and you come to some agreement, and then this happens, and you get this bill through Parliament or whatever that has everyone arguing with it, and then there's compromise in the House of Lords, and then it comes back down to House of Commons, and it goes up, and so on and so forth. In Russia, like Putin wants something done, it gets done, right? So when he's going and meeting with these other people, in this case, it was Zelensky, but in the present kind of meetings or encounters with Americans, there is no compromise. It's like our negotiations is we get our way, or you can sod off. So it's like the US come to Russia with a ceasefire potential, and they say, well, no, I mean, ceasefire, we're not against ceasefire. Ceasefire is definitely a good idea. But what we want is no NATO, demilitarization, denazification. We want all of the territories we've stolen, all of the stuff that he said right from the beginning. And it's like, okay, so we're back to square one. And that's exactly where we are. Sir Richard Sheriff said this the other day on Channel 4 News and said it very well. And it's just like, so someone's just posted this, which is a really good, I think, appraisal of what's going on here. Sign the minerals deal. Ukraine says, okay. This is all the US and Ukraine. Sign the minerals deal. Okay. Get out of my office and say thank you. Okay. Ceasefire for 30 days. Okay. Including on land. Okay. And give us the minerals. Okay. You don't want peace. We do. Then you're going to have to make more concessions. Why? Because Putin won't make any. And this, so America is acting on behalf of, Ukraine have done everything that the US has asked them to, essentially speaking. And the US has not asked Russia to do anything. Putin makes the demands, and those demands go back on Ukraine. It's disgusting. And the US is working on behalf of Putin. There's another way of seeing it. Run over.
From Ukrainian perspective, Irina, what has to happen at this point? I mean, I guess Zelensky has to go along with this sort of for a while, see what Russia says, see what Putin does. But I guess at some point he's just going to have to say, ceasefire, okay, but giving into these conditions, absolutely not. And will he have the majority of Ukrainians having his back? Will they back him up in a refusal to say, sign over the occupied territories, sign over new oblasts, and the military stuff that we talked about earlier?
Well, that's a very good question. So when I was reading the summary, of the talks they had in Saudi Arabia, I was like, I finally felt a little bit of a relief, because finally there was some attention directed towards Russia instead of again asking Ukraine to do something, at least from my sources, the people I'm reading, in the media I'm reading, because every time before that the demand was about Ukraine, and that's what just like JP just mentioned. It's like always Ukraine has to do something, and nothing is asked from Russia. And now I see it as like waiting for a step from Russia and waiting for the Trump and Putin to talk again. And we will see what happens next, because after they talk, these things might be directed into a completely different way. But it was a very, very good sign for me that they continued the US aid to Ukraine. So it was just like, I was reading a Facebook post from one of the Ukrainian men who was a part of that delegation, and he was like, we were on a phone with our representatives in Poland, and right in an hour after we finished our talks, they confirmed the processes were renewed and the aid was moving again through the kind of storages in Poland. So, and regarding a question about Ukrainian people and whether they would agree to this, by now I'm completely in my bubble. I'm in a bubble of people who are either fighting or supporting the fight, or volunteers, or families of those who are soldiers. And for these people, I could never imagine they will agree to Zelensky signing some kind of a territorial agreement, given the expectations Putin has, to give up 4 oblasts, which 2 of them they never controlled ever. So I cannot imagine people agreeing to this. They will be against it. And even if outside of my bubble there are people who would agree to this because they are kind of tired of war, tired of all the losses and stuff like that, even though they do not participate actively in this. But I'm sure this is the minority, so majority is still against it. But even though some people will agree to that and will agree to give up territories, I think there will be a huge, rare sentiment from all of the people who are fighting, and this is going to be very dangerous because we have thousands, of people who are fighting and who have arms in their hands, and this is an extremely dangerous thing to do inside our country that could provoke a conflict inside our country, could provoke a civil war, could provoke chaos. And I think administration of our president completely understands it, so they will have to think of how to do it and how to put it. And I don't think they will do it. I don't think they will agree. So for me, my opinion is, to sum it up, it's that most of the people, maybe not the big majority, 90%, but maybe 55 to 65% will not agree to signing this deal with giving up 4 regions of Ukraine. But even if we do this, there are part of people who will support it. There is a part like that, but people who are not supporting it, they will stand up, and it will cause major issues. And you have to consider it upfront and to think upfront. And that's why I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And if Zelensky is either forced aside or he feels he can't go through with that and moves aside, then you've got someone like Zaluzhny who would absolutely, not accept these conditions, and is also very much in touch, as you say, with what people are thinking about and talking about in the various front lines and battalions.
Can I just throw in a couple of positives, because there's it's easy to doom here. So the positives, Friedrich Merz, German Chancellor, to be the German Chancellor, has said, quote, "Germany is back. We are ready to defend peace on our continent." So this is the release of all that funding. And so this is and I think this is a nice iteration of Germany compared to 1939, right? So this is okay, we're back and we're a force for good. And actually there's a whole bunch of money. There is a rumor going around from the Spiegel that Taurus aren't a panacea, right? But they are going to give Taurus to Ukraine. I would imagine that will take place. That's positive. It's really interesting that Mark Carney, the de facto prime minister, the prime minister of Canada, has eschewed going to the US to talk to Trump, and he's gone straight to the EU to shore up economic and security ties, which is exactly what you'd want him to do if you want the world and the G7 to coalesce around really Ukraine and Europe against the US. You've got Howard Lutnick, the Treasury Secretary, just speaking to Maria Bartiromo on Fox News at the moment, where she breaks it down to him. She's like, have you seen that the Atlanta Fed is saying that there's a 2.4% contraction in the economy, and he's like, so she says investors are on edge with the possibility of a recession after the Atlanta Fed predicted a 2.4% contraction this quarter. Lutnick said, what? Say that again. 2.4% contraction right here, right now. That's ridiculous. She said, have you spoken to the Atlanta Fed president? And he said, absolutely not. So like, I think there's just this complete delusion about what's going on economically in the US, even with the people who are making these decisions. Meanwhile, Canada's getting on and doing things with Europe's getting on and doing things for Ukraine, and the insanity that is the US. I know people keep telling me you need to forget what's going on with Trump. It's very difficult because he's right at the center of everything, but actually there is, if we redivert our attention to what is going on positively for Ukraine, there is a lot of good news in terms of what we can do as Europe. Europe can do it. We can stand up. And if that money is there and that political will is there, yes, it's going to be difficult. It might take longer than we would like, but we can help Ukraine to the degree, hopefully, that it's needed.
Yeah, agree. And so, like, many things were activated throughout the last half a year. So comparing where we were like 6 months ago and where we are now, it's like the changes are significant, and they really hope it will move towards that direction, especially after Merz comes into his role for Germany, and then after, you know, other countries will be seeing it and maybe seeing some strong steps from other allies. It will kind of push them to make their decisions too.
Yeah, yeah. Crazy times that we live in. Crazy times that we live in. But there you go. There was, if I can show a little video.
Show a little video. And I was going to check how much time you guys have got as well, because I think
I'm going to have to shoot
10
in a
minutes
second.
or so.
Yeah. This is, I presume these are Russians. If you want to show, oh no, I haven't presented it yet. That would help.
Present it, and I'll pop it up there.
So there we
go. As long as it's not another one of your tawdry books or products you're trying to push there.
Oh dear, Irina's gone.
Crap.
Did you get rid of her?
I did. I pressed the wrong button.
Oh dear.
Sorry.
This is what happens when you let
Irina,
JF host. So this is, they're holding a dove here. This is some kind of peace ceremony. I think these are actually Russians as well. And someone's saying this basically is summing up the Russian peace process here. That poor little dovey. He's going to be released beautifully into the air here. Way! Poof.
He's strangled him. Oh no! Right.
And they're all like shouting, "Yeah, we've got peace."
Yeah,
I mean, it's horrible. That's a dove that's not obviously looking in too good a straits. But that's kind of like a metaphor for the peace. Yeah, we'll do peace. Oh, poof. Yeah, we're going to shout about it anyway because hey, it's all.
Before you even press that button, Irina, I mean, it was so obviously Russia, because there's this phrase, isn't there? Portlist. It just means tawdry or tacky or, you know, completely lacking in taste. And unfortunately, usually you can kind of guess, you know, where the clip originates from.
Yeah.
Because of that. I met someone very curious. I was introduced to someone who apparently was a political prisoner. And I was shown around the town of Sergiev Posad, which is a strange sort of monastic town outside Moscow. It's got tons of monasteries and churches. And this guy had been a political prisoner, and he'd been in the Gulag. And, you know, my host I was with thought it'd be really interesting for me to meet him. And so, of course, I had 1,000 questions for him, having, you know, read Gulag Archipelago and all this stuff. I had 1,000 questions. I wanted to get something really kind of, you know, insightful and deep. And so I just asked him, well, what is it about the Soviet Union? What was it you really didn't like? What, you know, because there's not many people resisted. So what actually forced you? And I was expecting something incredibly deep. He just said, I didn't like their aesthetics. That's all I could get out of him.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, so I'm just checking to see. It's do you find yourself at the moment these days just endlessly scrolling through like news feeds and whatnot. I am just addicted.
It's a disaster. I'm supposed to be finishing this book off, Jonathan. After you've plugged your books earlier, I'm supposed to be finishing my one off, which is a collection of interviews from the channel. And because I find myself at like 1 a.m. looking at news and more news and more news, and then what I'm supposed to do is to go to bed 12, sleep, decent sleep, wake up at 7, do the book. I just can't get it together. Can't get it together.
I've got editing that is now a year and a half old that I'm so behind on the rest of my life. My entire life just revolves around Ukraine and geopolitics, and there's nothing else. My brain my brain can handle it. It's just my time doesn't allow for it, because my brain doesn't allow me to spend any time doing anything other than finding out what's going on in and around Ukraine. It's just that's the insanity of life.
Yeah, I feel like 1 month ago, I felt like I have no capacity at all to do anything else, and then all these news and all of the developments, I was like going to bed 2-3 hours later than I typically did before. And I'm okay, I have more capacity, but this is so overwhelming. I cannot, we will see for how long we can handle that. I don't know.
Yeah.
Not that long, unfortunately. And you've probably got a little bit more health and youth on your side. So I think Jonathan and I need to be a little more careful with our get our beauty sleep, because we definitely need it.
Well, you say that. I mean, you've got about 23 years on me, I think, isn't it? So I'm all right for a good few years, until I get to your age. But
that's a little running joke we had when we were traveling there. Everyone assumed that poor Jonathan was had a far harder life than I have, and that he's much closer to pensionable age than I was. But that's just, what do they know?
I was told off by one of your viewers the other day when we did a live stream, because they thought I was being rude to you by just and I called you Fink, because that's what I do, and we need to differentiate Pierce from Fink. And so there you go. And someone really great live stream, but my goodness, who was that man being so rude,
so disrespectful too.
I was like we do know each other. We have been in each other's company. There you go.
What you don't know is that I do feel quite sensitive about my surname, actually, because
this is what you told me. I was like,
when I was at school from it.
Yeah, when I was at school, I was like, oh, don't do that, because then it just justifies the fact, oh, now I can't say that, so now I can't call you Fink.
For how long do you know each other? Basically, was it on Ukraine topic, or were you acquainted before?
Well, we'd been interviewing each other and stuff before we went out to Ukraine, but that's the first time we'd met in person. And it was I was speaking to some of Jonathan's friends, and they were saying it was kind of love at first sight for him, and it's like, which is nice. I appreciate that, but it was a beautiful time we had together.
Cool, lovely.
It was lovely. What happens in Lviv stays in Lviv.
Yeah, this is true. Yeah. Can you bring up Mitch Mazerol's comment, because it's to Iryna, and yes. I was going to ask this earlier because I did see his comment earlier, but he's super chatted it now, so it's even more generous of Mitch as ever.
Have a look at it. That will be this one, won't it?
Orange one. Yeah, go into the starred.
Oh no, how do I? Come on, buttons. Jesus, buttons.
Just press it. Just show.
It's not behaving. Come on. Okay, here we go.
Yay!
Got it. Yay!
Can Iryna tell us whether or not drone motors are now being domestically produced? That would seem to be a critical input for drone production. Seems logical to say to leave China behind as a supplier sooner versus later. Something you did actually mention last time we spoke. You did mention motors, but you still mainly get them from China. Any thoughts on that, Iryna?
Yeah, so basically, I'll have to research that. I know there are people producing different parts and not motors, and I know that I saw drones with motors that there is some kind of label, like hobby drone, whatever manufacturer, whatever Chinese manufacturer, on the motor, and I saw motors labeled with tridents and labeled with some kind of Ukrainian drone, pro-motor, or whatever, which seemed to be Ukrainian manufacturer. But at the same time, I saw cases where people just, buy Chinese stuff and ask them not to label that, and then put their labels and then tell it's produced in Ukraine. Yay. So I am not quite sure. I cannot tell that is 100% sure. I can tell I saw a couple of motors with Ukrainian labels on them, but just on top. I didn't check what's inside because it was assembled. But I saw motors that were labeled as if they were produced in Ukraine. But at the same time, I saw cases of people, making something and claiming wrong things about it. So I don't have any evidence we are producing it. But given that we are producing advanced things, like cameras and thermal cameras, and some kind of chips, I think we are producing drones. I'll have to check it and come back to you. But motors do not seem to be, the most sophisticated part of the drone. So I really hope we are doing it now.
Yeah, can I just say thank you very much to Mitch Mazarol for that super chat. Also, Mark Biscu for both of his very generous super chats. Really is super kind of you. Just a big thanks to Johnny Christensen, a little super sticker there as well. Really appreciate that, Johnny. Some Danish love. Mitch Mazarol said, another one, saying, please spend some time highlighting the campaigns you all have on the go. So at the moment, Jonathan Fink has a Dzyga support that's still ongoing. Even though they've reached the total, they want to try and get a little bit more to afford a further drone. So at the moment they're 2,000 out of the 3,500 extra past the end of their campaign. So if you want to click on Jonathan Fink's description and his link there, that will go to Dzyga's port. And I am doing one for NAFO at the moment where we're almost 50% through, and that's with myself, Roman Trocomets, and Rick the Ukrainian. So we did a Dzyga's port one. We completed that. Super proud of the work that we did to help out Dzyga's port. They're an amazing bunch of people, and you guys in my audience were super generous in how you raised for that so quickly. So yeah, that's what's going on.
Yeah. And there's CAF Ukraine later in the year. There's a Easter campaign going to be kicking off later, and there's also the 69th Sniffing Brigade, also raising for trucks and stuff. I think they're keen to
NAFO
to kick some stuff off as well.
Well, that's what we're doing at the moment. We've got.
You're doing that one at the moment.
Right. Yeah. We're doing our own one with Rick the Ukrainian and Roman Trocomet. So that's 50%.
Well, I'm probably going to kick one off. Working directly with them on that and figure out how I make that work. But yeah, no, the audience has been particularly generous. I did utilize the fact it was my birthday last week to try and drive the donations forward, and that kind of seemed to work because I used a bit of emotional guilt there. Don't buy me any presents, just donate to drones instead. That seems to. That's what drove all those donations over the last week. So it was a little sneaky, but it actually was my birthday, and thank you for the birthday wishes.
Cool. Then we need to get you a signed flag for a birthday gift.
Yeah. It's not like they were going to be buying me a pint of chocolates anyway. So, this was a useful little trigger there to get people to do that.
Yeah, it works very good.
But Jonathan, right from the start, has trained his audience. He's integrated these fundraisers into the way he broadcasts. And for my audience, it's a little bit of a new thing. But I'm hugely, impressed and heartened by the CAF Ukraine campaign and now this campaign, and the fact we hit both targets is wonderful, and everyone's so incredibly generous. And people are also supporting our campaign to do more events. Pro-Ukraine events, and have a bit of an impact. There's some very interesting stuff taking place on that. We will announce a bit more in the coming weeks as the dates and venues firm up. But to anyone who's supported us on that, you will be having a major impact, and I think you'll be very excited to see some of the events that we've got lined up.
Cool. Great, that would be awesome. I haven't visited any of your events, but I have visited a post-event, dinner, and I love people I met there.
Absolutely,
yes.
So please consider, joining and supporting that. And I listened to the podcast. I guess it was something you recorded and watched some of the recordings, and this is really cool. And the people you are getting are amazing. These are the folks I listen to, like SA Ukrainian, and they have good expertise, and I consider them very good experts in some topics. So it's great, and your selection is very good. So,
and I've got one which it's taken a while to do the substance, but I got another interview with Vitaly Portnikov, which I did face-to-face in Kiev, so that's coming out. And it's kind of super relevant because he talks about the decline of the move in the US towards a values-free foreign policy to a more purely transactional, way of doing business. So that's a fascinating conversation, which I think will have a lot of value. And that's so I think that our video is going up on tomorrow, where we visit you on site, and then on Sunday we'll get the Vitaly Portnikov. And even though it's in Russian with subtitles, I strongly recommend everyone bear with it, because it's very, very powerful insights that are in that one. That's probably where I was going to wind things up, aren't we, for today? And thank everyone who have supported us so tremendously.
Absolutely, yeah. The incredibly generous audiences that we have. Thank you so much. And I just hat tip to Richard Bennett, who gifted some ATP Geopolitics memberships as well. So thank you to all of those kind super chatters: Mitch Mazarol, Mark Biscu, Johnny Christensen, and Richard Bennett on my side of things. But what an amazing campaign fundraiser that both channels have managed to succeed with, in terms of Dzyga's Poor, supporting the amazing work that Dzyga's Poor do. So, and Irina, who is just a legend there, sitting there, being very humble, but actually the work that those guys do is awesome. Please give them a round of applause wherever you're sitting.
And a phenomenal team behind you there, Irina, and your wonderful husband, Dimka, as well, who we had the privilege of meeting in the flesh. Again, truly inspiring people.
Thank you very much, and thanks to all the people who were supporting the campaigns. It was really like reaching that in a short period of time, and we felt like all the donations and all the notifications we checked. So thanks everyone. Once again, you're awesome, and I feel the community vibe every time I'm here, because people are actively commenting, getting involved, and this is so cool. Thank you.
Well, join us again, definitely. And look forward to meeting the next time, as I'm sure we will soon. We'll conspire to make sure we can come over and do it all over again.
Absolutely.
Right, thank you, everyone. Right, let's end the stream there. Thank you to the audience. Thank you to my wonderful co-hosts.
Thank you, everyone. Take care, y'all.